Hi, I'm Andrew Goodall of Nature's Image Photography, and welcome to another in my series of How I Took This Photo videos. Today I'm going to start with a question. What's better than getting a great photo of an osprey? Well, getting a great photo of two ospreys. In this video I'm going to tell you the story of how I took this shot of two ospreys at Caloundra on the Sunshine Coast. There is a particular reason why I chose this photo. You might not notice right away, but both birds are not the same distance from the camera. The bird on the right is a little closer to me than the bird on the left. Now keep that in mind when I tell you my camera settings in a few minutes' time. Before we begin, I need to fess up and admit that this photo has been cropped. The sudden movement of the two birds took me by surprise a little, and I didn't have the shot framed up quite right. There was a lot more blue sky on the left-hand side of this photo. Now I'm going to go to a different crop and use that blue sky as the background for the notes I want to make on this video. So let's start with the simple stuff. The photo was taken in the late afternoon with the sun behind me and a little to my right. That low angle of the sun is what illuminates the birds so well, with light even getting in under the wings without causing too many dark shadows. The contrast is low, which makes exposure easy, and the late afternoon light also gives the picture the warm tones that make it easy on the eye. My lens for this photo was about 200mm. I say about because I was actually using my 150 to 500mm zoom lens, and it was zoomed into about 200mm. That lens comes with its own image stabilizer, and I did have it switched on. Although with the shutter speed I was using, it's questionable whether I really needed it, but it can't hurt. I used autofocus as I usually do for wildlife photography. My autofocus area mode was on single point, and my autofocus mode was on one shot. That's where I can hold the button down after focusing and the focus locks in place. Using this autofocus method, I can focus on the eye of the bird closest to me, then quickly recompose the photograph before I fire off the shutter. Now, here's the tricky part about taking this photo. Your basic theory tells you that a telephoto lens creates a shallow depth of field. Remember that the two birds are not the same distance from the camera. If I focus on the closer bird, the bird on the right, there's a real risk that the bird on the left will be out of focus, unless I get my camera settings just right. So, on to those all-important camera settings. First, the aperture. If I was shooting just the one bird, I would have my aperture wide open, which on this lens would have been f5. With that aperture I could keep my shutter speed high and my ISO low. But remember, the problem here is the shallow depth of field. The best way to fix that is with a smaller aperture, so for this shot I closed the aperture down to f8. With a handheld camera and two moving subjects, it was important to be able to prevent any kind of blurring with a good fast shutter speed. Anything over 1,000th of a second is probably going to be enough, and as it happens, this shot was taken at a 1250th of a second. Finally, the ISO. Usually I like to shoot at 200 ISO, but a fast shutter speed cuts down the light, and so does closing down the aperture by a few stops. Even in this fairly bright sunlight, I needed a little more exposure to make sure the photo didn't come out too dark, and I did that by increasing my ISO to 500. So with my settings all figured out, the rest really just comes down to timing. I'd fire off a few shots while the birds were sitting there doing nothing, just to make sure my exposure was as good as it can be. Then when the action happens, I fire off the shutter. My release mode is set to continuous, or what I sometimes call burst shooting. So as I hold the button down, the camera takes several shots in quick succession. All that remains then is for me to pick out my favourite photo when I get home and do that little bit of cropping to produce the final image. And there you have it, the quick and easy story of how this photo was taken. There'll be plenty more videos like this to come, so while you're here, don't forget to click the subscribe button so you can see each new video as they come online. I'm Andrew Goodall of Nature's Image Photography. Thanks for watching.